All right, welcome everyone to the 2023 session on leveraging college and career indicator equity data to inform CTE goal setting and grant writing. You will find, those of you who are here live will find the link to this slide deck in the chat. And also all of these links are on our main schedule page for all of the webinars we're giving this season, and so you'll be able to find the archive of this later today at that page as well. And so let's go ahead and jump in. So when we think about, and actually round 6 is the same, when we think about strong workforce, we know that they're talking about California is committed to investing in developing a skilled workforce, meeting the state's labor market needs. And we're talking about social and economic mobility. So when we talk about economic mobility, social mobility, we're talking about making sure our students have more opportunities than their parents did, that they are able to increase their income. Sometimes it's actually called like the American dream. And we've seen over the last 50 or so years a real decline in people making more than their parents did. And so our hope is that we can flip that and that CTE is one of the levers to do so. And so when we think about equity initiatives in K-12, workforce development is an equity initiative. It is an opportunity to provide our students with equity not only at the school level, but also in their own communities and when they leave our schools to have more equitable access to careers that can pay a living wage. So as you're thinking about equity, we also want to hone in on what we call special populations. So in CTE, we have a category of students called special populations defined by Perkins 5. And you can see that list here, right? So this overlaps with a lot of special populations that we see called out on the CCI that we'll look at later and some other areas. Interestingly, I was shared a little bit of this data in the last week. If you look at graduation rates for special populations, they are phenomenally higher for students who are CTE completers. And so I was working with one of the folks at the San Diego County Office of Ed who supports our foster youth and homeless students and the liaisons at all of the districts. And she brought this data to my attention. I added these average rates so you can really see the power of CTE. And we know there are many barriers. And so a student who might be homeless or foster who can stay in a program for multiple years and be that CTE completer does have maybe more steadiness in their situation, and that might be one of the reasons why they have better graduation rates, but this is really powerful data. And so as you're thinking about your CTE programs, it's really important that even though you might only have a few homeless youth, a few foster youth, that you come up with ways to really specifically interact with these populations, encourage them to be part of your CTE, at least at the percentage that your other populations are in CTE. And you can see here all of these different categories. For every single category, we have a very significant difference in graduation rates for those who complete CTE programs. And so that's one of the reasons why it's really important for us to really fulfill this promise to our students by providing high quality programs such as CTE. All right, so I am curious, those of you who are on the call, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your comfort level with the California dashboard and the college and career indicator specifically? Don't worry, the chat is not going to be part of the recording, and so others will not see the score you give yourself. So give me that 1 through 5, or you can hold up a hand. 5, you're here with me, you could be doing this presentation. You've been in the back end, you can see where all of your data comes from. Maybe you've even downloaded the data from the data download area. All right, so we've got a wide swath of folks here. And so let's go ahead and just really quickly look at what is the dashboard overall. Obviously, it's an online tool, and this is really a public-facing way that we have accountability, not just for our schools, but for the plans that we make for our schools, right? And so it's actually aligned to your LCAP, and it helps to help parents and educators and communities understand better what students are accomplishing in their schools. And just so you know, our CCI, most of the time we get that, like this little at the top, you see kind of a speedometer, if you would. Well, we haven't had that speedometer in a while because due to COVID, we had many measures that were not collected or not fully collected. And so this last year, for most measures, you saw like a little bar graph, and that bar graph was the current year results, or what we call status. And this coming year, you'll actually see the little speedometer for most of our metrics, because you'll have that status and the change. And the status and the change together are what's used to come up with the color that you are on the dashboard. The college and career indicator, because it's a multi-year indicator, it didn't have enough data to create a status for last year. However, they did upload all of your data in May, so I'll show you where that is if you haven't explored that yet. But this fall, you'll see that bar graph status for the California School Dashboard College Career Indicator. And then, so that will be for your graduates that just graduated in 23. And then your 24 graduates that December, then you'll see the full speedometer of status and change. The thing is, because it's an indicator based on the graduates who just had a 4-year experience with you, that means that all that data you've been collecting, and that's part of the experience of the kids who will graduate next year and the year after, that's all balled into the CCI that is to come, right? So there's no reason that you should pause on any of the work that you're doing, because you definitely will see that in there. And I'm going to give you this 90 seconds around the dashboard for those of you who might not be familiar. And let me just make sure I don't think I shared sound and video. Let's do that again, and that should work.
Welcome to the California School Dashboard. Around the dashboard in 90 seconds.
The dashboard is designed to help us understand how well our schools are doing and where improvement is needed. The best place to begin is by looking up your child's school. Right away, we see a variety of useful information called measures. Together, these give us a more complete picture of what's happening at the school. Once each year, all the information on the dashboard is updated. The state then assigns a color rating for each measure. These ratings are based on two main things: how well the school did at a certain point in time, and whether performance went up or down. If we look at one of the academic indicators, we see that overall, students fell 62.9 points below the standards for math, although they increased 14.3 points from last year. We can also see how students performed compared to the state average. And we can view a breakdown to see how well our schools served particular groups of students. Besides schools, we can view similar data about the district as a whole. The district section includes additional information about parent involvement and school climate and conditions. The dashboard puts clear information into our hands as parents, so we can talk with teachers and school leaders and help drive our schools to success. Are you ready to take it for a spin?
You can find more information about the California School Dashboard at www.casschooldashboard.org. This video was produced for the California Department of Education by Californians dedicated to Education Foundation.
All right, so what we know is that the dashboard measures a ton of different areas, right? It's college and career, graduate, English learner progress, academics, chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, and depending on grade level, you may have different groups of these for your school, your district, your organization. And then you also have some local indicators where it's self-reported. And today, though, we are going to be focused just on the CCI because that is where CTE lives. And so this gives you a little bit more information about all of the different 6 indicators that are here. And we're going to focus on the college and career indicator. Now, we'll kind of use this to some extent today as a framing. However, at this point, there are more components of this indicator that have been added, mostly on the work-based learning side. And so, we'll kind of frame this a little bit so that we see some different strategies we can use for each one of these. I've also created this interesting document, and this actually outlines everything that's on the college and career indicator, and it's almost something that you can kind of color in. It's a little bit more helpful because you can see the different combinations that you can get in order to be considered prepared on the CCI. And at the end of this session, stick around because I have some fun tools that you can actually even have students use as they self-evaluate their progress on a few of these components of the indicator, with some strategies on how you can use that in your system. What I've done is I actually have pulled together a few tools here for everyone. And let me just put the slide deck in the chat here again for those of you who might have popped in late. So this right here is just for all student groups, each district bundled, and it doesn't have the charters right now on this. I'll show you the one that does. But here you can kind of see, I've highlighted the areas that you might find are most interesting in a CTE space, right? So you can see if we look down here, like Coronado has a huge percent of their students who are CTE completers. And you can go through, you can see all of the A through G percent of your graduates. This is the graduating class of 2022. So your most recent graduates, not your most recent, but the year before, they haven't done anything with this year's data quite yet. We'll see this later. So this is a quick way to see a lot of the things that are part of the CCI in those additional reports. So this is part of a download. So this might be a spot that you might want to look at. And I'll show you the in-depth download where we're going to look at additional reports. Actually, let's do that first. And then you'll go like, I want a spreadsheet of this. All right, so additional reports. Let me put this in here. There are two ways to get to it. You can go straight to that, or if you're on your dashboard and you put in your district. I always like to pick on Sweetwater because I worked with them for so many years. And then if you're looking for your full organization, you're going to be looking for the CDS code that has all zeros at the end because your schools fill in those zeros. So if I go here, I can see, like I talked about earlier, they have all of the little bar graphs, which is your status. Those speedometers will come next year. But we're not actually that worried about this because I told you CCI is not on here this year. This is the magic button, view additional reports. If you click that, you're going to go through and you're going to come down and you're going to click the college career measures only report, right? So there's tons of reports. These are very fun. You could spend a lot of time clicking on everything in all of these reports. But if you go to the college and career measures report, this was just released in May. And this actually takes all of the data that you rolled up in CalPads that is aligned to the CCI and has it in a space where you can access that data. So this is where you can see your combined graduation rate, your AP, your IB, your A through G, right? And so as we go through, it's not about if they're prepared or not prepared, because that data isn't being reported this year. There's not enough data. The testing for the graduates didn't happen at the right timing. And so here, what we can see is in Sweetwater, they had about 1,100 students complete at least one CTE pathway. What does it mean to be a CTE pathway completer? That means you completed a concentrator and a capstone, 2-course sequence in the same pathway with a C- or better. Right. So these are over 1,000 students in their districts. That's about 16% of their graduates. And so here, though, the fun part is that you can actually see all of your student groups as they are within that. So here you can see, you know, that you have more than half are Hispanic, but that tracks with the student population in Sweetwater. There's quite a few Filipino, but I know that that is a population that they have a significant amount, right? So you can see the percentages of these students here. There's some groups, so like only one foster youth in all of Sweetwater completed a CTE pathway. This would be a space where I could say, wow, this is an opportunity to work with my foster liaison, to talk to them about opportunities for students. Like there's things around if they are in one school, but they get moved foster homes, they're allowed to continue to go to that first school. So in order to maintain a 2-year pathway, sometimes even if they're moved around, we might want to do a lot of work to prioritize them coming back to that same school so that they have the opportunity to have pathway completion. Or identify a school nearest to their new home that also has that pathway so they could continue it in a new setting, right? So these are the kinds of things that you might be able to pull out of the equity data that's hiding right here in the CCI, where you can make an impact, right? So again, homeless students, they did have 22 who completed the pathway, but that's only 8.9%, whereas of their total population, they have about 16% in CTE. So as you're kind of looking, okay, anyone below 16%, which is the percent of my total population, they are not getting equitable access to these programs. We see English learners. Now that's another challenge, is that sometimes they don't have as much room in their schedule to take these courses. As you're building your grant application, then you want to be thoughtful about ways that you might increase your support for these populations. Talk to your liaisons, talk to others in your district, come up with some best practices around scheduling, maybe even creating things like summer bridge or summer programs for students who may need support in those transitions. And so as you're thinking about your application, this data can be really helpful in better identifying which populations are not accessing CTE at the same rate as their colleagues. And as I showed you earlier, that data where you saw how many students do so much better, or their graduation rates are so much more improved. We know that CTE, it builds this smaller learning community. It builds like students actually see why they go to school, what's important. Wow, I can apply my learning in a new way. And so it not only makes buy-in in your CTE class, but you may see additional buy-in in your other classes. So when we're talking about student engagement, CTE can be a strategy in order to increase graduation rate of your special populations. Well, then you can go through and you can see there are a ton of other things. So the other place here we see is, of those 1,100 students who completed CTE, only 747 of those students were A through G as well, right? So only about 11% of Sweetwater are A through G and CTE completers. So this is another place that you might find ways to kind of move the needle when it comes to CTE and equity, is ensuring that all of your CTE classes, first of all, make sure that they're A through G approved. Usually it is in a G elective, but if you have things in arts, media, entertainment, then you can often get the arts credit for it. Sometimes engineering can end up under science. So it just kind of depends on the course and how it's built and if it meets those standards as well. But you can get, and also the credential, which is the other challenge, right? Having someone who's credentialed in both science and CTE, teaching that engineering course, means that you can likely get it A through G approved to be both a science and a CTE, right? So, but as we do that, then we can look here and see, wow, why are only 3.5% of my students with disabilities accessing both CTE and A through G, right? Interestingly, this metric, combining these, is a way that requires no high stakes testing in order to have your students meet the prepared metric. So when we look at students with disabilities, if we're ensuring that they have A through G schedule and that we're supporting them academically to have all C- or better, and that they are placed in a career pathway, then they can be considered prepared just based on their course completion. And it has nothing to do with a high stakes test, right? Because a lot of our students with disabilities struggle with high stakes testing. Not that we don't want to ensure we're preparing them for those tests, but if that is one of the things that's a barrier for them, how do we ensure there's other ways for them to be prepared? And it may be ensuring that they're A through G and CTE. So if I want to make sure then that folks can find their report. So if you're on the call right now, I want you to go find this report for yourself. And then if you have any trouble, let me know. So you might start here on the dashboard. You might put in your own district right here. Maybe I don't think Oceanside's on here, so I'll pick on Oceanside. And then you want that CDS code with all the zeros. And then you can go to additional reports and scroll down and you'll find this College and Career Measures Only report. So take a moment on your own screen and find that report. And then if you're having any trouble, I can repeat the steps or I can pull yours up for you. And the last link I put in the chat actually takes you straight to the additional reports. So you can just put your district in here or go to a county. Which this is for our juvenile court and community schools. So we only had 360 graduates. All right, give me a thumbs up if you found your report. Anyone looking for some support in finding their report? Report support. All right. All right, so this is a good time to kind of look at what you have and what some of your student groups might need a little boost in. Right now, WestEd is also putting together a report for all of our region in San Diego on the CCI that will give you equity gap data. So hold on. The regional consortium has funded WestEd to do these reports, and they're going to take data like what I'm going to show you, but they're going to have a column that says how many additional students in that population need to be served in order for you to meet bring them up to equal with your other student populations. Sorry. All right. So this is the complicated version of the data that you just looked at. I downloaded this. You can download the source of this data out of, and if any of you are from outside of San Diego County, I think everyone on here is San Diego, but you can pull your data from the CCI data files here, and the layout terms are here. But what you can do here is, let's say you just wanted to pull a district name. If you go to this filter, and I think, let me just make sure. All right, I'm going to give editing rights because don't edit anything, but you can't use the filter without those rights. So I'm just going to make a copy of this just in case anyone accidentally makes any changes. So what you can do, and if you're in this, go ahead and refresh that, and I will put the link in here. But let's look at, who do we have in here? If we've got like Mountain Empire. So I can go here and I'm going to go ahead and clear all the filter values. And then I'm going to look for Mountain Empire, and I'm going to just click that. And what that will do is bring up just the Mountain Empire data from the CCI in a spreadsheet format. And you can see each one of your student groups is in here. You can also see any of the charters that are under you or schools that are under you separately listed. And so you can go through and see all of the things that are being offered. And here's the student group, right? So I could go specifically to the full district, which is the one that doesn't have a school name, and I could see what's going on with our homeless youth. And I could click this line and I could say, wow, my homeless youth, I only have 6 students, which actually means I'm not going to get any data because that's less than 11. And then it becomes too specific that it could call out a specific student. So let's look at students, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, 89 students. And here you can see only 6 of those 89 students were in AP. None were in IB. I don't think you have IB. You'd say 21 of those 89 completed their A through G. Only 1 student with low socioeconomic status completed a CTE course. Now, this could be that, or it's a whole 2-year sequence. It could be data problems, or it could be system problems, right? So you can also go and say like, oh, what does everything stand for, right? Socioeconomically disadvantaged, English learner, students with disabilities. I have that here. But this is where you can go through and see your own district, and then by school, right? If you have it, oh, so someone else has pulled, oh, I see. Yeah, if anyone pulls, so Bonsall has pulled yours. Maybe we need a new tab for each person, because every time you filter it, it filters for everyone. This is on my to-do list. Actually, the best plan might be for you to go file, make a copy, and then you can play with it yourself. So let me do this. If you don't know, this is a fun trick in, and I'm going to go ahead and clear this filter actually. Clear, select all. So then all the data is here. And then I'm going to have make a copy here. If you click that, and I'm going to change that share back to viewers. If you click that, make a copy, it should make a copy for you. And I will put this in the chat as well. And then you'll have your own, thank you, yes, data issue. This is when you get into these collaborative data sharing in Google, it can be both your best friend and your worst enemy. So if you click that link I just put in the chat, it'll force a copy of that document. In order to do that with your documents, all you do is change the end to copy when you share. And so then that will give you your own copy that you can adjust as you would like. And that makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to access this, share it around your district, and utilize this data as you are applying for grants. All right, is everyone able to access that now? This is nice. There's 2 different ways then that you can access this data through the back end of the College and Career Indicator additional reports. That's kind of that nice, right? I think that this can be a lot easier way to see it for a lot of people. But when you get into wanting to see site by site, all the different pieces, right? Like this is like Andrew, the SBC High Tech High would be your district name. So here you're going to see all of the different High Tech High sites and what they are if you pull that up. The ones that are under that according to the dashboard. So you may not have every one of your sites there. But there are some great ways to get through that data in that way. So we already went through the dashboard. As you look at the dashboard, this kind of gives you an overview of what each piece means. But since these pieces aren't actually there on the dashboard this year, we're going to just kind of focus on that back end. But in the future, when they do come back, this might help you to better navigate the dashboard itself. You'll see in the dashboard, you'll get to see behind the scenes, each group has a performance level. And so that's another place where you can see how your students are doing and better identify, wow, if I have any groups in red or orange, those are my first focus areas, right? So I might want to focus on my foster youth and then start looking at my English learners, homeless, students with disabilities, and white students in this category because they're lower than the overall district average of green. And so when I'm writing my CTE grants, I can call these out. Now, one thing that our grant readers are noticing, particularly for K-12 SWP, is that people are putting budget items for this, but they're not explicitly calling it out in their plan. So if you would like money to focus on these, then in your project plan, you need to talk about that money that you're spending really specifically. So, if you want to do some workshops on supporting special populations for your teachers, then in your project plan, you need to talk about how you are going to support your teachers in learning more about special populations. Not just like, I'm going to send them to some conferences and hope that they go to special population sessions. One thing, and this is I guess I can announce it at this, but January, I think it's January 30th, we are going to have a 1-day professional development for teachers on special populations. Right now I'm working with our foster and homeless liaison on part of that development. And then I'm working with our equity team on some additional strategies. So I do have a registration for that, even though I don't have a flyer or anything yet. So I can share that with you as well. But how are you going to prepare your teachers for that? So it might be paying for their sub. It might be increasing the time that they spend with the folks. Like, how do they read an IEP, right? How do you go through that and ensure that's part of the professional development you're providing for your CTE teachers? How are you providing accommodations for these groups? Working with your workability team is an amazing way to support students with disabilities, because their job is to literally bring students with disabilities into the workplace. And so they know how to do this work. So you could also, while you're writing your grant, talk to your workability team. What are some of the costs that I could apply for in order for you to better train these teachers? Maybe you have some hourly people you can pay extra to come in and support your CTE folks. Maybe there's certain equipment that makes it easier for students to better engage with CTE. Those are all some areas that you could consider. As we're kind of still digging into the CCI, if you didn't really know how that status and change works, this is just a graphic representation of that. And so we can see, this year when you get your status, maybe you're at medium. And medium could be orange, it could be yellow, it could be green. It just depends on if you're improving from the year before or not. And so here you can see all of the ways that the student groups, once we have a color, then you'll get these graphs as well in the back end. And you can see here, right, we have students who are increased in the very high, decrease in the very high. We have maintained, right? So all of these are how the colors are assigned basically to different populations based on how are they doing, and are they improving from the previous year, or are they sliding backwards? Because obviously we always want to see improvement anywhere that we can. This 2020 data, 21 data, 22, all that data is available. Your old data, you can also see, like if you want to go back and look at all of your previous year's data, you'll see that like 2020, this looks, no, we didn't do testing in 2020. So let's go to 2019 is the year that this was, this is what we'll be looking at in the future. So you might have seen like this fun graph before. And then this is how we used to see the CCI represented in the back end, and we expect to see it like that. Maybe not. Oh, I think this coming year we should, because this will give us status for all of our students. So this fall in December, we should see this again. All right, so let's go through each one of our measures and think about not just CTE, but where can the other CCI measures be in relation to CTE when it comes to the CCI and applying for grants. So here, let's say for SBAC, if you're thinking about how we want to improve our SBAC, you could provide professional learning to embed literacy and math practices in your CTE, or you could be looking at some more integrated programs like Academy or linked learning models, which actually Golden Pathways, which you'll all be eligible to apply for coming January, is very linked learning heavy, and really allows you to expand your CTE into your core academics. And so here we have our first kind of concept is if you're trying to increase SBAC scores, make sure your CTE teachers have the capacity to teach math and English at a grade level. One thing that like grade level reading strategies, sometimes your English teachers already have rubrics that are grade level for speaking or writing that your CTE teachers could use for the writing students too there, right? So that they don't have to know what all of the standards are for every academic subject. But if there are tools on your campus already that your students are used to, then make sure that your CTE teachers have access to those tools along the way. So that would be a potential strategy in your grant. For advanced placement and IB, a related strategy would mostly be computer science is one place where we see an overlap between these. And as of last year, CTE incentive grant legislation names AP and IB aligned CTE programs. There's a little bit of gray area. Most of the time, it's going to be computer science, where we see the ability to use CTE incentive grant funding in order to support those students. So computer science would be a place where if you're looking for additional AP, then you could spend that money on supporting your computer science students for CTIG. College credit. We know college credit courses are often very well interlaced with CTE. So we know dual enrollment is huge. A lot of times when we talk about dual enrollment, if you are creating a capstone that's dual enrolled, it can either be counted as a CTE capstone or a college credit for the CCI because you can't double dip. So if you're creating CTE pathways, sometimes you want to do a 2-year sequence followed by a 3rd year that's dual enrollment. And so you can do kind of a 3-year pathway where the 3rd year is actually college credit. You can also just do dual enrollment in any grade level of CTE that fits with the college program and that you have support to do that in. And so, being really thoughtful about college credit is important. Articulation is its own kind of gray space. So articulation is not considered college credit for the CCI unless the students claim they articulated credit and transcript it on a college transcript, because that's what makes it a college credit. So it can't be sitting there in CATMA or whatever system you're using. It actually has to be claimed and transferred back in order for an articulated credit to count, which means it is nearly impossible to do for your seniors. But if you have a lot of articulated classes in your for your first year of your pathway, you may be able to get that transcripted with your students. And I will say San Diego Unified has done a really nice job of working with their college partners. And one thing they do is when the paperwork goes out at the beginning of the year for the parents to sign, like, hey, you're in the class, they include all that articulation paperwork. The parents sign it right then at the beginning of the class. They file it away. And then if the student meets the articulated credit and is going to claim it at the end, then they can pull that paperwork already done out of a file and go, and so that there's less barriers, right? So there's these system change that can happen that greatly increases your ability to ensure all students get college credit. We talk about the state seal of biliteracy. This may or may not, you may or may not offer it in your district, but one way to support students who are state sealed biliteracy students, a lot of times these might be students who are language learners who have capacity in more than one language. And so if we're building the capacity in CTE teachers to support language learners, it may also support your numbers on the state seal of biliteracy. If you want more information on that seal, there's a whole slide of info here. Military and JROTC leadership science is not a CTE class. It's kind of like an alternative CTE. There's some movements in the state to say, well, shouldn't this be under our umbrella? But it is also a career metric. It's just not part of the CTE system. But that does, it's not really a CTE related strategy, but as you're doing your work, a lot of times you may incorporate them because they need some of the same professional development your CTE folks need. If you have any questions about leadership science, there's some additional info here as well. CTE pathway completion, we know is 300 hours, completing a capstone course with a C- or better. And then you also need to do one other thing to be considered prepared. And so that might be a scoring on the Smarter Balanced or college credit or A through G. There are tons of ways that you can make an area of impact on your special populations as they are going into CTE pathway completion. So here's some things that you should consider as you're writing your grant. It could be work around course sequencing. Are you going to clean up your courses, make sure they're all sequenced properly? Do you need to do A through G status for those courses in the sequence, things like that? If you're looking at your data and you go, man, that looks really wrong, you might want to spend some time and possibly some money looking at your reporting errors. Are you rolling clean data up in your CalPADS report? Is your SIS talking to your CalPADS report properly? When it comes to recruitment into your program, this can be both in raw numbers, but also in equity. So all the data in the CCI, it doesn't tell you which programs those students are in. But you can walk into those classes, and sometimes I'll walk onto a campus, and we've all seen it, and you walk into a auto shop and you see a lot of students who might be special populations, and you walk into an engineering class and there's a lot of white males. And these are things that all of us understand are not the way we want it to be, but there's a lot of things that lead to that. And so doing really strategic recruitment and marketing so that our students see themselves in that engineering class, in those high wage, high growth fields is really important. A lot of times those initiatives means you're pushing into the middle school so that students, before they get to the high school, they're not predisposed to say, oh, that's a path I belong in because I see more people who look like me in those careers as adults. So where can you bring in more guest speakers to your middle school who have a broader range of diversity? Bring students from your high school down to work with your middle school students so that all the middle school students are like, oh, I already know a kid in that program. I would love to be part of that. I've already done a little bit of coding, and so I'm not afraid of engineering, right? So there are some really specific recruitment things that you can do both around gender and diversity when it comes to our CTE programs. The last data in DataQuest around this was in 2017-18, but if they come back around eventually and start updating DataQuest again, you'll get to see some of those numbers and the gender in each one of the CTE programs. And there are a lot of disparities. And so you want to get ahead of that. You want to make sure that you're being thoughtful about how recruitment and marketing works and how you are encouraging students of all backgrounds to participate in all of your programs. We also see retention being a struggle. Can you get a kid from course 1 to course 2? How are you communicating it? If you talk about a CTE course and call it an elective, what we've seen in some of our data capturing around that is that students don't think that they're going to be in it for more than 1 year. And so by using the term pathway and just the language we use, and then we can say, oh, here's the course of study that we imagine that you will take if you enter this pathway. It's not that you're locking a student in, it's just that you want them to not have to request in. You more kind of want them, if they don't want to be in it anymore, to have to come and request out, if that makes sense. So the default should be that they stay in that pathway because that gets them to that pathway completer status. And you saw at the beginning of this, that means increased graduation rates. There's tons of other data around that. So it's not just that we're like pigeonholing students into things, it's that we see that the small learning community that exists in CTE is a real support to students who may not always meet the same graduation rates as their peers. Pathway quality and consistency. you all are spending your time on webinars to write grants right now because you don't have time always to go and do all the hard work in the classroom with the teacher because you're stuck doing grant work, right? So what can you do to really increase that quality and consistency? If you and your principals walk into a CTE class and you're like, oh, this isn't what I would like to be seeing, what are you going to do to change that? How are you going to not just punitively say to that teacher, man, you're not doing what we want, but to say, hey, I know you came from industry and it is tough to get into education. What can I do to coach you up, to support you, to get you what you need in order to be successful as a CTE instructor, right? So sometimes it can be really daunting when someone comes out of industry to teach. No, they're not going to be great from the get-go. So it really does take that mentoring mindset rather than the kind of like boss mindset when you bring in a new CTE teacher. Are there things that you can do to increase that quality, that consistency from class to class and improve instruction? Again, A through G status. And then finally, master scheduling. You might find a master scheduling program that you want to pilot. You could use CTE money for if it really pulls your CTE students. You might get some coaching in master scheduling. You might go to workshops on master scheduling. That's just one other challenge where you might be able to apply for some funds. Again, A through G, we want to make sure that you are really thinking about having all of your CTE courses A through G approved. There are some additional measures on the CCI in work-based learning. And so apprenticeship is really big. And if you are interested in expanding apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeships, finding a local apprenticeship to work with is great. We also, Ernesto Rivera on our team is becoming a super expert on building pre-apprenticeships. So if that's a space you're interested in, don't hesitate to reach out. There are some data collection that are under consideration, and that includes student-led enterprise, simulated work-based learning, internships, and ASVAB scores. I think of these, the internships have the most momentum. They will not be making these changes this year, however, because I'm on that committee and there's still some data that needs to be looked at from the year that was just collected before a decision can be made and advice can be given to the Board of Education. So I don't see any major changes to the CCI in the coming year. There is, I'm going to end up, this will be a whole hour. Sorry, everybody. I was trying to be short so we'd have more Q&A time. But when we get into the RFAs themselves, there is equity both in the CTIG and the K-12 SWP. You'll see in standard 3A, you're looking for CTE specific counseling services, student support. We're talking about a CTE plan of specified support for all services is developed for each special population, right? So this right here, that is potentially a project that you could do with CTIG funds. Do you want to fund extra hours for counselors to do some of these specified support services or for your special ed team? Right? So that's a place that you'll see that. That's standard 3A. Standard 10 also has a lot around accessibility. So if your special populations need any specific accessibility needs, modifications, differentiation, fund them out of CTIG, put that in your grant. Access to all pathways, funded out of CTIG. Recruit, retain, and support special populations, fund that out of CTIG, right? So CTE incentive grant is really specific. Also things like these multilingual. So if you have promotional materials, but you have students who speak other languages, you can fund all of that translation out of your CTE incentive grant, right? So these are all things that you can write into specifically your CTE incentive grant. When it comes to strong workforce, round 6, most of these page numbers I went through and tried to update yesterday, but as you know, it just came out on Friday. So we know that they're looking for, this is kind of out of the RFA, but when you're writing, you actually want to look at the RFA and the rubric at the same time. And so what we see is, well, the RFA has this upper language, the rubric has the lower language, and it's under strong. So if we look here, uses data to identify equity gaps in the plan, that's what you're doing right now. You're here to say, here's the data that I saw. The CCI is one source of data where I saw equity gaps, and here's the evidence from demographic enrollment and completion. And then you want to be able to provide those statements that have that evidence. But if you're writing about these special populations for this rubric item, then your plan also needs to support these students, right? So your problem statement is going to say part of our challenge is supporting special populations. Then you're going to get to the project objectives, and you're going to say, we are going to clearly describe the efforts to close equity gaps, include activities designed to improve outreach and increase targeted academic supports. So it can be tutoring, right? And this is K-12 SWP. So here, outreach, you might be looking to bring more special population support to your feeder school or to your 9th grade, whoever's coming into CTE, so that they know they belong. You might be doing that work around translations, and you can also have targeted academic support. So you can pay extra duty for your CTE teacher to provide after school tutoring with these kinds of funds, right? So you want to make sure that you have these targeted academic supports in place in order to support your students. And as we get down here, this is going to be your work plan. In the work plan rubric, it's going to ask you to include those supports, intentionally improve access and completion, right? So what does that counseling look like? How are you ensuring that they're getting in and that they're staying in the program? And then what are these tutoring, mentoring, work-based learning, and where do those live, and how are those being accessed by your special populations? So that's the K-12 SWP actual rubric and how it's scored. It's looking for these specific things. So that's where you want to make sure you're going to mention them in the problem statement. You're going to come back with your project objectives to say, here's what we hope to accomplish. And then in the work plan, and here's how we'll accomplish that. And so as you're thinking about those special populations, you want to have those all connect, and so that it is easily seen throughout your work plan. So at the end, then you'll have all of the scoring. You do have some additional areas for bonus points down below as well. And it will also ask the final committee also goes through and has to yes all of these. And so you'll see here, is there evidence? It will align with programs for underserved students. Does the application serve pupils with higher than average dropout rates, right? And so these are two areas where equity impacts your ability to score on SWP. All right, here's that carrot at the end. So as I talked about earlier, I have this big, very complicated document, which I think helps us as district level or maybe site level administrators better tackle. But the reality is, in your system, you're only going to pick a few of these that are really your big priorities. So I've been working with Oceanside, and they identified 3 CCI areas of focus: CTE pathway completion, early college credit, and A through G course completion. And so for these, what they're going to do is they're going to give us out at the mid-year report grading period every year. So freshmen, after they do their first one, they're going to go see how far they are. They can color the boxes in. And then they're going to take a little survey that helps them evaluate where they are on that. So fun enough, I have turned this into a Canva template. So you can actually go in and make this work for you, but they're asking questions for their 9th graders. What pathways look interesting to you? Which college credit courses? Are you on track to complete A through G? So, and then 10th and 11th grade, what have you taken? What do you need to take next? Are you passing all of your classes for A through G? Those kinds of things. And then where are you headed next with 12th grade? So these are a way for you to create your own version of this if you would like. for implementation if you're trying to tackle some of these CCI challenges for all students. So this is kind of like that bigger one. So we could pull from this if you have other challenges that you want to address. I'm happy to work with anybody on creating, whether you just like the one that I worked on with Oceanside, we could just do that, or if you want to create one that works for yourself. All right, so that being said, this is the link to the presentation. Again, we have tons of stuff on our grant season that are coming up. Tomorrow, if any of you are involved in middle school or supporting middle school, Margie and I will be talking about middle school at the CTE at the middle school level. Next week we have, and on Friday, Leslie will be doing a deep dive on that K-12 SWP that came out on Friday. There are many other workshops coming up, and hopefully many of you are coming in person to the kickoff next week. And then the afternoon, I'll do a little bit on CCI, but we also have, for that, afternoon session, we have someone from the Center of Excellence at the community colleges, either Tina No Bartel or one of her colleagues, who will come in to talk about labor market information and how you can take that data and put that into your grant as well. One more fun, if you want to go into the deep end, as you're like, wait a minute, none of this makes sense with my data. I do have this pretty extreme guide to CalPads and the CCI. I've talked about that before. So if you are wanting to align anything with CalPads, I just wanted to add this as a resource at the end. And let me pull that registration for my special populations in CTE. And I will put that in the chat right here. If you would like to join that January 30th or send it on to your teachers, I will have this, I'll put this together and it'll be on the website soon. But if you are looking to bring more people in to support special populations, then you can join this workshop that I will be putting on in January. And that is the end of the webinar, and I'm here for the next half hour or so if folks have any questions about their own. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for attending.